Why hasn't Russell signed his new contract yet? Is Sergio Perez all but confirmed at Cadillac? Could Toto be fired at the end of 2026? And could we be in for a Lewis Hamilton shock mid-season retirement? I answer all of these questions and more in this week's edition of Your Biggest F1 Questions, which is now back on the channel that has been rebranded more than Simon Cowell's face. Welcome back to Wheel Sports. Hello everybody and welcome to Your Biggest F1 Questions, which is hosted here on a channel that is about as good as branding as Caitlyn Jenner is at driving. You may have noticed that it's been rebranded back to Wheel Sports after being Grand Prix, then Wheel Sports, then Hassett Racing Rants, then Current and Combustion, and now back to Wheel Sports. I'm not going to spend time on this, but to just quickly explain, essentially, midway through last year, I got tired of just constant F1 content and wanted to do other stuff. I was doing my documentaries, which I was enjoying and all that stuff, but I really wanted to do automotive content again. I put it all onto the same channel. Turns out F1 people don't watch automotive content as much as I thought they would have, and tried that for a while, which led to Current and Combustion and Current and Combustion clips, because the main idea was to have the longer automotive videos on this channel than the clips over there. It made sense for a while, but I realized it just wasn't working. So I re-upped the Car Nerd. And as soon as I did that, this was just a pure F1 channel again, at which point it just seemed like a good idea to rename it back to Wheel Sports, the name that all of you seem to love and that I know and love. So that's where we're at. So if you're wondering, that's why it's here. It will be staying, I promise, as Wheel Sports from now on, because I've now got my automotive channel with the Car Nerd, I've got the Jason Hassett Show, and I've got my documentary channels. And I've got, other work that I do. But the main thing is I do love this. And what I did find in all of this process, which made it great, was I was able to start this Your Biggest F1 Questions because I wasn't too worried about doing daily episodes or whatever. And it turns out this is a great way for me to run the F1 channel, where I do the questions every week. On a Wednesday, they come out. You guys get to either decide to watch all of this full big video, or you can just watch the clips from it that come out through the rest of the week. And that's what I'm going to do going forward. So that's to explain that quick. Let's not spend too much time on it, but you may have noticed as well, there is now a new lovely background to bring us back to Wheel Sports. So do what it says back there, which you can't actually see, which is to subscribe. Anyway, and it's an homage to Vettel, as you may have realized, my favorite F1 driver of all time. So without ado, let's jump into the first question straight from the dyno's mouth. All right. Jamie says, do you think Perez to Cadillac is 100%? Honestly, yeah, I do. So not only have I heard it from people that I chat to around the paddock to get some information, my famously unreliable sources, but also Thomas Marr from Planet F1, a fellow Irishman, a guy who I do trust when it comes to feedback on this kind of thing, has been posting about it as well. But yeah, I had been hearing about this before the summer break, that it would be confirmed during the summer break. Now it seems like it's going to be after the summer break. I guess there's no real rush on this, given Cadillac isn't starting until next season anyway, but it does seem like it's very much a done deal. And I think it's a solid idea for the team. At the end of the day, look, Checo didn't do particularly well at Red Bull, but who has outside of Verstappen? But it is I think a very pragmatic choice for them, because you're going to look at drivers with experience, because you're coming in as hopefully a midfield team, but likely a backmarker, even with all the funding that Cadillac has, given it's starting from scratch. And you want to have drivers who have experience with feedback in teams, have experience in, startup teams that are kind of pulling everything together. And you also want feedback from a driver who's been at a top team. That would be the ideal situation. And Checo gives you all of that. On top of which, sure, his stint at Red Bull didn't go brilliantly, but he is a Grand Prix winner. He's won a good few Grand Prix. He held it together under pressure in a difficult situation for the most part at Red Bull. And Checo was very much the king of the midfield for a long time and has been adept at over-delivering in cars that had no rights being there. So he's definitely the type of driver you would want. And I think the question is who's going to be his teammate, I'm sure. But realistically, when it comes to deciding between Checo and Bottas, I personally would have gone with Checo. The reason I would say that is just that Checo has been with a top team during the most recent era of F1. Now, there is a big regulation change for next year, but he has been at a top team more recently than Bottas. So I think it's a good idea. Now, what I would imagine they're probably hunting to do is try and get Checo and Bottas at the same team, because as much as you do want kind of some young, hungry rookie, for a team like Cadillac, which is coming in on the back foot late into the game, jumping into a brand new regulation set, having two experienced hands, especially one who has always over-delivered in Grand Prix and one who has always over-delivered in qualifying, would be a pragmatic decision to have the two of them together. I would love that as well, because it would allow us to answer the age-old question of who's better, Bottas or Checo. And I imagine it would work out exactly as I've always thought, which is one would over-deliver in qualifying, one would over-deliver in the races, and I've just said who is who, so you can guess that one. However, if I'm honest, what I would absolutely love to see is for a Checo Alex Dunn lineup, given how Alex has been doing in Formula 2 and given that I'm Irish. That would be the ideal lineup for me. But I don't know. I'm suspicious of whether that would happen, especially because he's a McLaren driver as well. And I think McLaren's going to want to be careful about its cards at the minute, because while I do expect McLaren to stick with this lineup for quite a while, one of those drivers isn't going to win a world championship this year. And one of those drivers could quickly start to find themselves in a situation where they're not quite happy at the team kind of being the runner-up, if that makes sense, which we've just seen so many times. I mean, Ricciardo, Bottas at Mercedes, for example, Hamilton even, jumping to Ferrari because he was becoming the runner-up at his own team. Yeah, I said it. So, yeah, I don't know if it'll happen, because the main reason I'm saying that is that McLaren might think to themselves, well, we should probably hold on to Alex for a while. However, deals can be done, and Zach, if anything, is not he's a deal maker. So there is a chance they could get a loan contract for 2 years or something like that. That would be the best lineup for me, but I have a feeling it may be Bottas and Perez. The only thing that could sway that is that obviously Alpine is going to Mercedes engines next year. Bottas is very much a Mercedes driver, and he could go there. But think about it from a simple point of view, which is, Cadillac will be starting with Ferrari engines. Checo's never driven a Ferrari engine. So you could have a driver who has had 3 seasons of experience, or 3 seasons, is it? 22, 23, and 24. Yeah. 3 seasons of experience with a Ferrari engine in Sauber, and then a driver who's experienced like with a top team in the chassis. Both of them come together. I have a feeling it'll end up going that way. I think Bottas may look at the Alpine situation right now and think, you know what? I'm good. I don't want to go there. So that would be my guess for the moment. Whether you're Christian Horner looking for new job opportunities while still on gardening leave, or visiting a printing shop in Woking to send some Ferrari files to a mate at McLaren, you're going to want to make sure your digital footprint is protected. And that's where I use NordVPN. Whether you want to just watch your favorite content while on holidays, or check your banking information while on a pesky Starbucks public Wi-Fi, NordVPN has you covered. It keeps your digital footprint completely encrypted, and it does it faster than a Sauber team. And I mean Sauber in 2025, not the bad Sauber from 2024. And the best part is you can get NordVPN with 77% off on a 2-year deal plus 4 months free for a limited time only using my link, nordvpn.com/Hassid, which will be in the link in the description and the first comment. And even better than that, you can get a 30-day money-back guarantee. So unlike an F1 driver switching to Ferrari, you don't need to have any regrets, and you can check it out now. So thank you for watching, and thank you to NordVPN. And now let's get back to the video. Okay, next question, straight from the Dino's mouth. Trev, straight for the guttural punch here. When will Lewis leave Ferrari? So, look, brass tacks, it's not going to be at the end of this season. Some people have been wondering whether he'll retire at the end of this season, given the head-to-head, I think it's 15% to 75, or 15% to 85% in favor of Leclerc. Leclerc is 50 points ahead in the championship. And, all of those things, I think, are fair, given who Leclerc is, given it's Hamilton's first season, given he hasn't been particularly strong in this regulation set and was struggling against George. So struggling against Leclerc isn't exactly unexpected. The only thing that would make me think there's a chance he could leave at the end of this season, which I think is a 2% chance at best, at most, is that all of the same problems he had at Mercedes have carried over to Ferrari. Literally all of them. All the same excuses, all the same setup things, all the same braking issues. Everything that he was feeling at Mercedes has essentially carried over to Ferrari, except it's been multiplied by the fact that he's not used to Ferrari engines, he's not used to Ferrari, and Leclerc is incredible and has been there for a long time. So, yeah, I think all of those things go against him. Now, I don't think there's any chance he leaves at the end of this season, because surely in his mind, one, he has a contract for next year, and two, in his mind, I'm sure he's thinking, well, look, most of my issues have only come about in this regulation set. There is a brand new regulation set next year, and there's a good chance I'll be much better in the new cars, and it'll, my natural talent will all just come back. So I think he stays for 2026. The thing about Hamilton is Hamilton was never the guy who worked, hands-on with the engineers in the simulator, spending all his days and nights focusing on the data and working with the engineers. He's never been that guy. He's just very, very good with his raw natural talent. So I think for me, this really depends on how things go next year. If he jumps in the 2026 cars and that kind of raw natural feel for braking points, turn-ins, for traction zones, all of that comes back, and he's just able to kind of use that talent to kind of reel in the car again, then I think he'll stick around for a couple of seasons until he realizes that Ferrari aren't going to win a championship until the late 2380s in a couple of centuries from now. But I think he'll stick around a little bit longer if he gets that feel back, maybe wins a race, that kind of thing. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to get to next season, and even if he feels better with the cars, I think he's still going to realize that drivers like Max, George, Leclerc, all these guys are going to be able to beat him now, because I do think he's just lost something, maybe some feel. But I also think the fact is he will have been racking his brain about, everything over the last few seasons. And I think that kind of overwhelming confidence in his abilities will be gone. And I think it's easy to hammer that if he come into a new season and Leclerc is, say, beating him, even if he feels better in the car. And I think it's going to be end of 2026. He will retire. I genuinely, that's where I think he'll go. I don't think he stays into 2027 unless everything flips completely on its head and he's properly fighting Leclerc and they're in a championship fight as well. Because I just think there's so many variables next year to go against it. Like, he needs to be on top of the car is the first obvious one. He needs to be able to take on Leclerc, which I just don't think a Ferrari is going to be able to. And then he needs to be in a title contending car, because if he comes into next season and Ferrari is 5th in the championship, 6th in the championship, it's unlikely Ferrari is going to get back until at least the next regulation set then, because the guys ahead are going to be so advantaged. And Ferrari, I just don't think has that McLaren in them at the minute. They're still a mess. They're still board controlled. There's too much to do. So I think end of 2026, honestly, is my opinion. I don't see him sticking around much longer than that. I just don't think it's going to be any further than 2026. So yeah, Trev, that would be my opinion on it. Okay, next question, straight from the dyno's mouth. Okay. Dane Lua asks, if Hulkenberg had better luck with teams, would he have been better than Vettel, who is Dane Lua's favorite driver? And again, as you may have guessed, my favorite driver as well. Oh, this is a big question. Well, I mean, first of all, the problem is, what better luck does he have? So there is a solid chance that Hulkenberg could have had more titles than both Vettel and Verstappen. That could have happened. And the reason is, we rewind back for a minute. Hulkenberg came in 2010. Was it 2010 or 2011? I always get this confused. I think it's I'm pretty sure it's 2011, right? Because he got the pole position in his first year. Yeah, I think so. So he came in 2011. So by that point, obviously, he's not going to Red Bull for obvious reasons, like Vettel is racking up. That's the only team that could have won a title during those years outside of Alonso, maybe, who came very, very close in 2012. And then after that, obviously, you have Mercedes' year of dominance, where apart from 2017 and 2018, no one was getting close. So in order for him to be better than Vettel, he would have to be at Ferrari and really overperform. I don't think anyone was winning in Ferrari in 2017 or 2018. I've had this debate a few times on the channel, and I do think there is a chance in 2017, a Ferrari driver could have won. But I think it's more on the team than any driver, if I'm honest. And we see what Ferrari does to drivers and what Ferrari does with strategy and all these different things. So I just don't think anyone's winning at Ferrari. So with better luck in teams, there are two options. He could have either been a multiple world champion, and I'll explain that one in a minute. Or if the tires hadn't been a huge problem for him, he probably would have ended up at a better team anyway. You know, he probably would have ended up in one of the top teams because of the natural talent that he has, which means he likely would be a Grand Prix winner and the podium issue would have just never came about. But there is a slight chance that Hulkenberg could have been a multiple world champion. And that slight chance is Mercedes had a few options for who they wanted. Lauda famously wanted Hamilton, and being a German team, they were clearly pushing for German drivers. So they would have wanted Vettel. Vettel was approached in 2011, I want to say, or 2012 before he renewed his contract with Red Bull in 2012. And obviously Alonso was approached, but he was trying to do things at Ferrari, so he didn't want to go. And you need to keep in mind where Mercedes was at the time as well. So Lauda was very much pushing for Hamilton, which turned out to be a very, very good choice. However, if they couldn't get Hamilton, there was no more world champions to go after that they wanted. They seemed to have no interest in Button, for example. So their next option was this up-and-coming best rookie since Hamilton, went on to be the best rookie till probably Charles Leclerc after that. Sorry, Max Verstappen was in between. My apologies. And that would have been Hulkenberg. This up-and-coming, absolutely spectacular rookie, young driver who had only been in a season or two by that point and was German. And that was Hulkenberg. So if Hamilton hadn't have signed with Mercedes, the most likely outcome would be that he would be in with Rosberg. And then the question becomes, could he have beaten Rosberg? Well, the thing is, I think he could have, because it took him a while to get over the tire issue. But I think Mercedes would have been able to be more on that. They had a better technical team than the midfield teams he was in to coach him through and help him get on top of that tire management. So I think they could have. I don't know how long it would have taken, but I think they clearly would have had a world champion anyway. And we saw that, with Hamilton and Rosberg, they kept Rosberg around until Rosberg wanted to leave. So even if Rosberg won 14, 15, 16, I think Hulkenberg sticks around and by that point is on top of it and starts winning after the regulation change in 2017 and wins a couple of championships. And genuinely, in terms of just pure talent, Hulkenberg is like a Hamilton. If he's at Mercedes, I think he takes a championship or two away from Rosberg. So yeah, I think that there's a good chance if Hulkenberg had have gone to Mercedes, he could be a 5 or 6 time world champion. It wouldn't be absolutely out of the question. The man has the ultimate talent. Yeah. So that's the only way I see that happening, Dane, if I'm honest. Next question, straight from Zdino's mouth. Okay, Zach says, and I'm guessing this isn't Brown, but anyway, thoughts on McLaren's winner conversation. Yeah, this is a really interesting one. Look, I've given credit to McLaren last week for how they're allowing both sides of the drivers' garages to kind of fight each other on strategy, which a lot of people who just don't like Lando or don't want, fair fights are against. Well, I'm not going to get back into that, but I talked about that last week. Yeah, but McLaren have genuinely been trying to make this as fair a fight between the two as possible. Now, in fairness, they're in the easiest position to do this because they're 559 points now to Ferrari's 260. Like, they've got more points than the next two teams combined. So they're in an easy position where the constructors is more or less a done deal. In fact, if they get 3 more 1-2s, I think that's it. I think they seal the championship. So in the next 3 races, they could actually seal the championship out for the constructors. So they're no longer worried about the team, and therefore they can have this, 1-2 fight between the guys, be as fair as they want. What this is about is apparently they are going to be sitting down with their drivers between now and the end of the summer break and essentially saying, look, the way this is formed out now, Russell, Verstappen, and Leclerc are all out of this title fight. There's essentially no way they can catch you guys unless you guys really fuck up, which isn't out of the question, but it's more likely that Ferrari, Red Bull, and Mercedes fuck up. So it's, basically a done deal that one of those two guys are going to be champions. So they need to sit down and basically say, look, how do you want us as a team to handle this? McLaren have a great lineup between the two, regardless of how you feel about them. It is the ideal lineup for McLaren, and I think they've realized, they've got just a brilliant lineup for the next few years, and they want to keep it that way, I reckon, because it's the easiest option for them. So they're trying to figure out how to make sure that neither of their drivers get really upset when they lose, because while one of them is inevitably going to win, that means someone will inevitably be the loser. Number 2 is the biggest loser in Formula 1. I think it's probably going to be Norris at this stage, but we'll see. So they've sat down and said, look, how do you want us as a team to celebrate? Like, do you want it to be a situation where if Oscar is crowned the title winner, does the entire team go up and absolutely go ham and celebrate with the driver? Or do we do a calm, relaxed thing where that driver's garage celebrates with the driver, but the team is more congratulatory, but keeps in mind the other driver's spirit and all of these things? Look, I think the obvious answer is the team celebrates like crazy. It's going to be their first driver's champion since 2008 when they illegally stole the championship from Felipe Massa. But, it's going to be their first driver's championship in a very, very long time. And they're going to celebrate. They absolutely are going to celebrate. But I think this is a pragmatic approach to sit down and go, look, how do you want us to celebrate? And the obvious human answer from both of them, because you'd be a prick not to, is going to be, no, look, guys, obviously, if I lose, celebrate with the other guy. Like, go crazy. I'll get up there. I'll put on my poker face and celebrate too. Treat it like the Oscars. It's fine. Deep down, they'll be going, you better not fucking celebrate with them. But that's what they're going to have to say because it would just be petty to say otherwise. So, I imagine that's how the conversation will go. But I do think it is a pragmatic approach getting in front of it, so you can kind of say, look, we had this conversation. You knew how this was going to go and you can't really logically have hard feelings about it. You will, but you can't logically. And therefore, you have to kind of deal with that now and get on top of those feelings now. I think it's a pragmatic approach. And I think it just adds to, I'm surprised by how well McLaren are handling this season, considering how badly they fumbled last season in just every single way. I know they won the constructors, but they fumbled it otherwise. So I'm surprised by how well they're holding it. But again, as I said, I guess, it's an easier one for them, isn't it? Because they're just clear of everyone else now. Next question. Jenny says, thoughts on Russell's contract? Yeah, well, this is interesting. So obviously there's been some mixed feelings here. The simple fact is, it is 99.99999% likely that both Russell and Antonelli sign up for 2026. That is just waiting to be done. Right? There's just some questions about duration and time. Duration being the important one. But essentially now the Verstappen question has been answered. He is staying at Red Bull. He doesn't have a choice by the looks of it. But either way, he's staying at Red Bull, at least for 2026. But he had some conversations that seemingly were around 2027 because it will be easier for him to leave in 2026 and he will have a better view of the landscape in 2026. This is where there's been some interesting tidbits that have come out between Toto and Russell and so on, which is there was this long conversation of Russell being accepting that, well, of course you talk to Verstappen. He's the current reigning champion, he's 4-time champion, all of these things. Of course you talk to him. See, Hamilton fans, of course Mercedes talked to Vettel. But, of course you talk to him. And he said he wasn't worried about it because of his performance and all of these different things. And, kind of hinting that, well, it would be Kimi that would be gone, not me, because I'm performing brilliantly and, I've been here the longest, all of these things. Anyway, now that's a done deal, you would expect it to just be a quick sign off, right? However, the latest on it is that essentially Russell is holding up on the 1+1 because now Mercedes are kind of somewhat at a strange stalemate. Because beforehand, the obvious thing is Mercedes is in the strongest position because they can hold out for Verstappen, right? They can hold out as long as they want. But now they don't have Verstappen, and there's not a single driver that they could actually get on the grid who is better than Russell right now. There may be in a year or two. Rookies are coming up, all these different things. But right now, there's no one else they can get. They're not getting Leclerc for 2026 because although I think Leclerc may leave at the end of 2026, depending on how that goes, he has put so much time into Ferrari, he's going to stay for 2026. There's no one else they can get. But likewise, there's not really anywhere better that Russell could go. He could go to Aston Martin, obviously. I'm sure he could get a seat there if he wanted to, but maybe not straight away. So Russell's probably in the position now of saying, look, this has been a bit of a dick around year. You're in the position where if I leave, you're left with a rookie who is underperforming at the minute, who might be better by next year, but you're taking a massive gamble there. You will therefore have a driver who is not as good, and then you were banking on having the best car when McLaren exists with the same engine to get Verstappen in for 2027, which is not a guarantee. So you can either take the bird in the hand you have now, or you can lose that bird and gamble on two in the bush for later on, the two in the bush being Verstappen. So I think he's pressuring that point. And you know what? I think he's probably right to. Because if Mercedes do have a title-winning car next year, he's going to want to be focusing fully on the title fight and not worrying about his seat being taken for 2027 when he has been the team leader, outperforming all of these things for a couple of seasons now. So he seems to be pushing for a 2+1 to guarantee his seat. And obviously Toto also wants to hang on to Antonelli. So he's probably not going to want to be in a position where he has to contractually replace Kimi Antonelli with Verstappen for 2027 if he wants to go down that route. So he's trying to dangle the two of them. And I think Russell has kind of put his foot down now and said, enough's enough. The problem is, I think if push comes to shove, I don't think Russell jumps. And I also don't think, I don't think Aston, for example, replace Stroll with Russell. And I don't think they replace Alonso with Russell for 2026 at least either. Maybe they do, but I don't think so. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably going to end up with a 1+1. I think Toto might hold firm on this, but it'll be interesting because they're both kind of foot down on it. But it'll be interesting to see what we get. We'll know pretty quickly because if they say multi-year deal, that can be a 1+1 with the option being on Mercedes' side. But I would imagine what it'll probably come down to is Russell will put some foot down where he'll say, okay, well, how about this? If I sign a 1+1 with you, the option can only be taken up if I'm outside the top two in the championship. And that kind of protects Russell because that way, if Mercedes do give the top car next year, then all he has to do is be fighting for the title. And that's what he's going to want to do anyway. And if he's not fighting for the title next year, then he's probably going to be looking at his options anyway. So I think they're probably trying to figure out what kind of compromise they can come to. But I think it's fair to say Russell isn't exactly happy with the way Toto has handled this. And likewise, I'm not surprised. Like, Russell has been performing. So why should his seat be up for grabs when Kimi's been underperforming, for example? It's a fair point to make. So, yeah, that's kind of my read on the situation at the moment. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Next question. Mark, why has Albon been destroying Sainz? Look, I know it looks crazy. I think it's 51-16 in terms of points, is it? Or 51-19, something like that in terms of points. I know it looks bad, and it is. But I think this is, like I was talking about with Kimi Antonelli last week, expectation versus reality. I think it was always going to take 6 or 7 races for Sainz to get on top of the car, and I think that kind of happened. I do think he got on top of the car to an extent. But look, I think this has just kind of shown what we were wondering last year, because the question was always, is Albon actually that good, or has it just been his teammates? Because when Franco Colapinto showed him up and then this season comes in and doesn't do great, you think to yourself, well, clearly Albon isn't that good then, so Sainz must be terrible. And I think, and maybe this is just my bias because I like Colapinto, I think it's not the case, and I think Colapinto is better than we see right now, for example. And I think the car last year was difficult. I just think there's so many variables in F1, to be frank, that it's hard to make these definitive decisions. But basically, I think Albon is a brilliantly capable driver. I don't think he's top tier, but I also don't think Sainz is top tier. But I think drivers like Albon and Sainz are the closest to those top tier drivers. I think they bang on that door, but they're just not quite allowed inside of that entry of the kind of 8, maybe 7 or 8 drivers on the grid who are those proper top tier world champion class drivers, and I think Sainz and Albon are just outside of that. So I think this is kind of confirmed that Albon is up there. I do think Sainz will potentially outshine him and be better, because I do think Sainz has a bigger upper limit than Albon has, and I think he's more capable of adapting as things change, especially as we go into 2026. However, the Williams was a much more capable car from the start of the season, and during that time, Albon was already part of the team for 4 seasons. Sainz was adapting, so he loses a big slot of points there, which is to be expected. So I think that gives you that big kind of difference in the swing, 51-19. That's why context is important there. So I don't think the points really illustrate the difference in the drivers. I think you've got to take into account, you've got at least 6 or 7 races where he's adapting. And look at every other driver on the grid who's been trying to adapt. 6 or 7 races, easy. Hamilton's going to be 19, 20 races by the looks of it. I'm really digging him this week because I gave him slack last week, I think, but, doesn't matter. Anyway, doesn't matter. And then on top of that, I do think, and I don't want to be this guy, but I do think there is some truth to when Sainz finally kind of started to get on top of the car. He's had a really bad run of bad luck. He's had DNFs that are kind of not of his fault. So has Albon, to be fair, but DNFs when he's running in the points. He had Silverstone where Leclerc took him out, no fault of his own. So I do think he has just had some bad luck as well throughout the season. And that does happen. Like, drivers can just get very unlucky throughout a season. It can't always go your way and things swing back and forth, which is why I keep saying, the Piastri-Norris title could go down to the line. Luck could play its part. So I don't think Albon is destroying Sainz by any measure. I think that our expectations were wrong. And I think it's similar, like I said, to Antonelli, where we expected, Antonelli to come in and absolutely blitz it. And I think that was just never going to happen. And we expected Sainz to come in and from race 1 be able to adapt to a new team, a new engine, all of these new things, new management, everything overnight. And I think that's a bit unfair. But I think that is just down to the fact of he's been so good at quickly adapting to other cars. Renault, McLaren, Ferrari, and so on. But I do think these cars, this generation has been so much more difficult to adapt for every driver at every team change that we should probably just expect it to happen, you know? So that's my thoughts on it. Let me know what you think. And let's jump into the next question. Bob, Jesus. How long before Toto is fired? Bob, have you been watching the Blatantly Biased Racing podcast? Because Casual actually says he thinks this could happen in 2027. Look, you know what? It's not a crazy idea. I think we all think because he owns 33% of the team that it just can't happen. The fact is, other entities, Mercedes and is it Petronas or is it Petronas or is it's someone else? I can never remember. Own the other 66%, right? So obviously he's got a lot of leeway because even though they haven't been winning titles in the last 4 seasons, they came off the back of 8 consecutive constructors titles. And it's not like they've been absolutely nowhere over the last 4 seasons. They have won races. They've still been in that top 4. They haven't slipped into the midfield. And, you know, they've had peaks and troughs and so on, you know. So they haven't been awful. And at the end of the day, Red Bull has kind of been dominating. But I think in the last kind of 12 months since McLaren jumped and made that big step, I do think the pressure there will start to mount from that point. Before that, it's Red Bull domination. No one else is winning, so it doesn't really matter, I think. I think you just say, look, they got this regulation set right. It's too hard to catch up. We're focused on 2026. It's an engine regulation. That's our time. I think when McLaren starts winning with the same engine, questions will start to bubble up, right? Because they've got the same engine. They've got, you know, you've got every opportunity the same as them to win. So why aren't you winning? You know, you've got solid drivers, so you can't blame that. Questions start to be raised. Now, I think big questions will be asked next year if Mercedes, who have the new engine, right, lose to McLaren. I think if Mercedes come in with, you know, a great engine and lose to Honda and Aston Martin, but are in the title fight, Toto's fine. You know, as long as he's close and his drivers can be fighting for a title, even if they lose the constructors and drivers, I think he's okay for a few seasons. I think that kind of buys him like, look, it's fine margins. They've got Newey, they've got Honda. You know, what can you do? We'll just keep fighting. We'll keep fighting. We'll get there. I think when Toto comes under real pressure is if next season we come into a situation where the Mercedes is, like it's rumored to be, the fastest, and it's McLaren who are winning, you've now got a situation where you should be beating McLaren. It's a fresh regulation set. It's the same engine. You've got no excuses anymore. You've got a great driver lineup. There's no way. And I think we'll see something along the lines of Allison will be either let go or someone new will be brought in. They'll try and, you know, steal Vache, or they'll try and steal someone from another team. They'll try and pull Rob Marshall or Peter Prodromou or, you know, Dan Fallows. I know that doesn't sound like an upgrade at the moment, but you get my point. They'll try and steal someone else from another team and say, look, clearly our chassis team isn't good enough. Now, I have said for a long time that I don't think it's guaranteed that Mercedes win in 2026. I thought it would be for a while because it looked like the Mercedes power unit would be so much better. But then McLaren and their new team and Rob Marshall and so on kind of put me back into the thinking of what I was thinking before this, which is Mercedes aren't on to win just because they have the best power unit, because they have never been the best at building chassis. They have been good at it. Don't get me wrong. They've been great at building chassis. But even from 2014 to 2020, Red Bull and Ferrari have always kind of been building, for the most part, better aerodynamic cars. And Mercedes have had the engine advantage and been close enough on chassis that the engine advantage pulled them above. That's kind of where they've been. And from 2022 to 2025, that's not been good enough. So in 2026, the problem is even if they have the best engine, they have to supply the exact same engine with the exact same mapping, with the exact same details in the exact same weekend to McLaren. And the advantage of being able to package your chassis because you're a works team, I don't think gives them the jump on the fact that McLaren have a better overall aero team now. I think McLaren and Rob Marshall and, they can find all the gray areas. I think they can beat them. Anyway, to go back to the point, if that's the situation and McLaren are beating Mercedes in the title with the same engine, I think you get a situation where, like I said, Allison is replaced. And I think that's the first domino where you go, okay, I've replaced him. And then you need to quickly show the board, like, hey guys, I can do this over the next 2 or 3 seasons. But you can quickly get to a point where by 27, 28, you're starting to come up on a decade without a title. And you're being beaten by guys who have everything from you. So you have no excuse. You can't blame, the engine in this situation. You can't, there's very little you can blame other than leadership. I think that's when it'll become a problem. So I don't think it'll be quick. I think he's earned a stay of execution for quite a while. But I think that is the scenario where I could see it being start to chip away, where if he doesn't turn things around quickly, they will start thinking about new management. Because realistically, Toto has never built a team from scratch in this situation, right? Like Wolff, like Horner has, which is why Horner going to an Alpine or whatever is a good idea, because he can build that team from scratch. Toto very much took, I know this is going to offend people, but took Ross Brawn's work and ironed out the fine details on top of it. And he should get huge credit for, 1, doing that, and then 2, leading the team through all the challenges of 8 years of constructors, which isn't easy. Like, I don't want to diminish that. But my point is, when you're trying to rebuild up and you haven't got one big advantage where you can dive up on, it could be tough. So yeah, I could see it. I could see Toto being fired. Not being fired, but maybe being replaced in 27's too early. 28 or 29 maybe. Yeah, sure. I could see it. Okay, next question. Straight from the Dino's Myth. Tom says, predict where the current top 8 drivers will be in 2027. Okay, so for this one, because it's top 8 drivers, I'm going to just take it on the top 4 teams at the minute, right? That's probably the smartest way to do this, which isn't really fair because Aston would be there. Actually, I can do this a different way. I'm going to take the drivers from the top 4 teams at the moment, which is kind of bastardizing this because you said top 8 drivers and Tsunoda is not a top 8 driver, but I think this is the only way to do it properly without getting really murky and without spending 25 minutes on it. So I'm going to do it this way. So starting with McLaren's 2 drivers, I think they're still there in 2027, right? Was the question? Yeah. I think the 2 McLaren drivers are still there in 2027. I think there is a situation where 2027 could be the last year for those 2, because I think the 2 of them will sign up to stay on, because there's a good chance, as I've talked about with the Mercedes question, for McLaren to be the title contending car next year. And I think both drivers will stick around if they're even sniffing a title, because where else do you go? Why do you jump ship at that point? So I think Piastri and Norris stay at McLaren, at least for 2027. If Piastri's won, say, 25 and 26, I think midway to 2027, Norris could be looking at a place to go, and vice versa. Could just as easily, Formula One's crazy, could just as easily go the other way. Norris could somehow pull through this season and then have the confidence where he's not questioning himself every 14 seconds and win 2026. I think it's less likely. Stranger things have happened. So I think they'll stay there. The other teams are the bigger question. I think Mercedes for 2027, I'm going to say Mercedes for 2027, I think will be I think it's going to be Russell and Antonelli. And I'll give you a quick reason why. I think there'll be a situation where for 2026, if they're winning the championship, then I think Toto sticks with both drivers. I think if he's winning the championship, there's no reason to change when you're on the up. And bringing Verstappen in means bringing the whole Verstappen camp in, including Jos and so on, which I know Wolff gets on with right now. But think about this. The time to make that decision will be halfway through 2026. If you're winning the championship, it means you've got Russell performing well. So you maybe don't replace him, especially when you're going to have to pay huge money and there could be potential downsides. And I know Verstappen fans will be shouting, but I'm just saying, after watching Formula One for 20 years, there's been so many times where the best driver doesn't get the best seat necessarily because things just don't work out that way. You know, they just don't. So, like, you know, if you're coming off the back of 2016 and you've got Lewis in the car who's won the championships for you, even with Rosberg gone, you sign a Bottas. You don't want, you know, another number one coming in and confusing things. You don't want to replace the guy who's just won a championship. That hasn't happened since Hill, if I'm right, in 1996, right? So we could get a Hill situation where Russell is leading the championship halfway through the season and gets replaced for 2027. But it's just very unlikely in modern Formula One. And I think in that situation, unless Kimi is doing really poorly, I think Toto doesn't want to give him up. So I think that'll stay the same. I'm probably the only person thinking that. So let's see. I think Ferrari is the bigger question because I don't see Ferrari being up there. And I think Ferrari could be down both drivers for 2027. But I'm going to say Leclerc leaves and goes somewhere else. I'm not quite sure where he goes, but I think he goes for 2027. So I think it's going to be Hamilton, Behrman, because I don't think they're going to have a better option for 2027. So I think it's going to be Hamilton, Behrman. And I think Leclerc is going to have gone somewhere else, but I'm not quite sure where. Could be Audi. Like Audi could be on a trajectory to come up. So it could be Audi. Who knows? I don't think it's going to be Aston, and I'll explain why in a minute. Probably obvious why. I think then, so I think it's going to be Behrman, unless another Ferrari up-and-comer has really killed it somewhere that I'm missing. Like maybe Bortoleto has done so good in Audi that Ferrari poach him, which doesn't make sense, but, you know, stranger things again. And then I think Red Bull will be Lindblad and Tsunoda, right? Now that sounds crazy, but I think Tsunoda will be the experience hand. I think Red Bull are going to have a really terrible situation next year. And I think instead of promoting Hadjar, they're going to push to promote this like amazing new young rookie, just praying that it is Verstappen who has just left the team. It could be Lindblad Hadjar. It could be Tsunoda Hadjar. But I think it'll be Tsunoda Lindblad. I think Tsunoda comes with experience. And I think the drop-off at Red Bull is going to be so big next season. I think they're going to want to keep experience. And I think that Red Bull will lose Verstappen, but not to Mercedes. I think Verstappen will take Alonso's seat, who will leave Aston Martin at the end of 2026. So that would be my best guess. That's the last question. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. As always, don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and let me know your questions in the comment section below. I really, really appreciate it. And welcome back to the final rebranding, I promise this time, of Wheel Sports.